Have you ever had this strange momentum where you're right in the middle of a thought? Like maybe you're silently judging someone you just saw, or you're cringing really hard, replaying something incredibly awkward you said at a party last week?
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Right. You are fully in it. The emotion is totally raw. And then suddenly something interrupts. And it isn't another thought, it's you. It's like
Yeah.
a second layer of your mind quietly steps in from the background and goes, wait, why am I thinking this?
Yeah, it's a remarkable shift when it happens.
It really is. For a split second, everything just slows down.
Yeah.
You are no longer just thinking, you're actually like watching yourself think.
And most people don't even notice that moment because they are so completely, absorbed inside the theater of their own minds.
Oh, yeah.
But if you have experienced this, you know exactly how different it feels. It creates this small, almost physical gap between you and your own consciousness.
And that gap, that split second pause, it isn't just a random brain glitch. It is a very specific and actually quite rare phenomenon called metacognition.
Right.
It's basically the ability to think about your own thinking. And we're not talking about reflecting on an argument like hours after it happened while you're lying in bed.
No, not at all.
Our focus for this deep dive is what's called metacognitive IQ. This is real-time mental monitoring. It's catching your thoughts while they are still actively forming.
Which requires an entirely different level of neural processing.
Mhm.
I mean, if this happens to you frequently, it's an indicator of a highly specific type of intelligence that most people simply never fully develop.
Wow.
Yeah. And we are going to explore the precise mechanics of this rare intelligence,
Yeah.
the actual neuroscience behind why it happens, and importantly, the hidden mental tax it demands from the people who operate this way.
Well, the way I visualize it, and we'll see how this tracks with the actual science, it's like you've been playing a first-person video game your entire life.
Okay, I like that.
You're just running around, looking through the eyes of the character, completely immersed in the action, and then suddenly the camera glitches.
Right.
It zooms out into third-person mode. And for a second, you can actually see yourself holding the controller. You see the environment around you from a completely different elevated angle.
That's a great analogy because in that glitch moment, you are actually hijacking an entirely different system of observation within the brain.
Really?
Yeah. To understand the mechanics behind our thinking, we first have to look at the foundational layer of metacognition. It all starts with catching your mind in the act.
Right.
The scientific term for this is meta-awareness. It's the ability to notice your cognitive processes in real time.
Okay, so imagine someone says something that slightly irritates you, like a passive-aggressive comment at work, maybe.
Sure.
Normally, the reaction is instant. You feel the annoyance and you respond without thinking. You become the irritation.
Exactly. You fuse with it.
But if you have this meta-awareness, something different happens. You feel the irritation start to rise in your chest, but at the exact same moment, another part of you notices it and thinks, oh, I'm getting annoyed right now.
Yes. And neurologically, this is a tug of war between two distinct networks. The raw irritation is happening in the limbic system, specifically the amygdala, which is, ancient, fast, and highly reactive.
Right, the lizard brain.
Exactly. But that noticing function, that quiet voice that says, I'm getting annoyed, that lives in the prefrontal cortex, that's the brain's executive control center.
Oh, wow.
When you have high meta-awareness, your prefrontal cortex is creating a tiny, almost invisible wedge between the raw impulse and your physical action.
And inside that wedge.
Inside that tiny pause, you're gifted with a choice. Most people don't have the wedge. They just react.
But, that makes perfect sense for a passing thought or mild annoyance. But what about raw, overwhelming emotion?
That's a different story.
Because it's one thing to notice you're slightly bothered by a coworker. It is a completely different ballgame when someone hits a raw nerve, say, deep embarrassment, or intense blinding anger.
Right.
Usually that stuff just consumes you. It feels like a physiological hostile takeover.
It feels like a takeover because the amygdala operates entirely independently of your conscious logic in those moments.
Yeah.
It floods the body with cortisol and adrenaline before you even realize what's happening.
Yeah, you just see red.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here is where metacognitive intelligence intervenes.
Right.
Right in the middle of that surge of anger or embarrassment.
Yeah.
You catch it. You label it.
Label it.
Yeah, you say to yourself, I'm experiencing intense anger, or that actually hurt my pride more than I expected. This is a mechanism called affect labeling.
So wait, just giving the feeling a name actually changes what it does to you.
Profoundly. I mean, the moment you put a linguistic label on a raw feeling, You force the brain to route blood flow and electrical activity away from the amygdala and into the language centers of the prefrontal cortex.
That's crazy.
You're effectively hitting a neurological brake pedal. You shift control away from that fast, reactive emotional system and hand it back over to the deliberate decision-making parts of your brain.
Mm.
Labeling the feeling literally creates distance.
But wait, if you're constantly observing your own anger or your own sadness, like some scientist in a lab looking through a microscope, doesn't that make you feel like a detached robot?
That's a very common concern.
I mean, it sounds almost like you're alienating yourself from your own human experience. If I'm sad, I kind of just want to be sad, not analyze the sadness.
And that's fair. In intense moments, relying on this real-time monitoring can indeed cause a slight feeling of detachment. You might feel like you're hovering slightly outside yourself, observing the grief or the anger rather than drowning in it.
Right.
But the massive payoff, and the reason the brain evolved this capability, is agency. You gain the ability to choose your response rather than being a puppet to your emotional reflexes.
So it's a trade-off.
It's a fundamental trade-off. You trade a bit of raw, messy immersion for the power of emotional regulation.
Okay, I see that. And if you establish this habit of constantly observing your reactions, it seems like the brain wouldn't just stop there.
How do you mean?
Well, if it knows how to observe, it naturally takes the next step, right? It starts trying to anticipate these reactions before they even happen. Like observation turns into simulation.
Oh, absolutely. The observation system naturally evolves into a predictive engine. And this is where we see the phenomenon of mentally simulating conversations and
Yeah.
complex outcomes before they ever take place in the physical world.
Think about the classic shower argument.
Yes.
You're standing there, or maybe you're just staring at your phone on the train, and you are running through a high-stakes scenario in your head.
We all do it.
Okay, what if they say this? Then I'll say that. No, wait, that sounds too aggressive. Let me adjust the tone. What if I frame it this way? You're essentially playing out all the dialogue trees of reality.
Yeah, and the underlying mechanism here is called predictive processing. The brain is not a reaction machine. It is a prediction machine. It's an evolutionary tool designed to map out multiple paths and minimize surprise. Because if you can anticipate an attack or a social rejection, you can prepare a defense.
Right.
But the most crucial detail here, and this is fascinating, is that neurologically speaking, the brain does not fully distinguish between an imagined experience and a real one.
Wait, how is that possible? Obviously, I know I'm in the shower and not actually in the boardroom.
Consciously, yes, you know that.
Yeah.
But if we look at functional MRI scans of a brain imagining a complex scenario, the motor cortex and the visual cortex light up in patterns remarkably similar to how they would if the event were actually happening.
Oh, wow.
The neurons are firing the same pathways. You are literally pre-experiencing reality to test the structural integrity of your responses.
It's like you are constantly running a dress rehearsal in your head.
Exactly.
The set is built, the lighting is perfectly tuned, and you are just running the lines over and over. But
Yeah.
if you're always rehearsing, don't you just end up freezing when the actual play begins? Like, the moment arrives, the other person goes completely off script, and you just blue screen because you didn't simulate that specific path.
And that right there is the major vulnerability of predictive processing. Overcalculating absolutely leads to hesitation.
Yeah.
If you run too many simulations, you suffer from decision paralysis. The cognitive load of mapping out 20 different futures means you are mentally exhausted before the real event even takes place.
Because you spent all your energy.
You spend all your metabolic energy in the simulation, yeah. But when calibrated properly, it makes you incredibly sharp and highly intentional. You aren't just reacting to the world. You are moving in rhythm with it.
But that internal simulation engine doesn't just stop at predicting what other people will say, right? It eventually turns inward and audits its own foundation.
Yes.
Because when you're used to playing out multiple scenarios, you naturally start questioning your own deeply held opinions. This is what I like to call the ego bypass.
I like that term. This touches on the concept of cognitive flexibility. You see, when most people form an opinion, they lock it in. The brain builds a fortress around it, defending it, justifying it, and protecting it from outside threats.
Right.
But the metacognitive mind runs a quiet, perpetual internal audit. You might think, yeah, that guy is totally wrong. And then instantly, another voice cuts in and asks, wait, is he actually wrong, or am I just viewing this exclusively through the lens of my own biases?
I think it's easy to misunderstand this, though.
How so?
If someone is always second-guessing their opinions and asking, am I wrong here, it looks a lot like insecurity. It looks like they just don't have the backbone to stand by their
It's a
convictions.
vital distinction, though. Insecurity is driven by a fear of being inadequate or being judged. This internal audit, on the other hand, is driven by a profound desire for accuracy.
Ah.
It is real-time verification. You see, the human brain naturally prefers cheap, easy certainty. Ambiguity takes a lot of metabolic energy to process. It takes far less energy to just assume you're right and move on.
That makes sense.
So questioning your own deeply held beliefs requires intentionally overriding that default energy-saving mode, which makes it incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
You aren't doing it because you feel weak. You are doing it because you value truth over comfort.
Truth over comfort. And that exact same mechanism is what allows you to catch your own biases live.
Yes.
Let's talk about first impressions. You meet someone, and instantly you either like them or you don't. Most of us just roll with that gut feeling.
We do.
Later on, we justify it with logic. Oh, I just got a bad vibe, or I could tell they were a great person. But a highly metacognitive mind pauses right in that moment of snap judgment and asks, wait, am I being biased right now? Did I just stereotype them based on one trait?
And catching confirmation bias or subtle prejudices as they're actively forming is an extraordinary cognitive feat.
I bet.
The brain is literally designed to protect its biases because biases act as mental shortcuts. If you had to evaluate every single person and situation from scratch, your brain would overheat.
Right, would be too much data.
Exactly. So to have an internal alarm system that goes off and says, alert, you are using a mental shortcut, please review, requires an immense amount of self-regulation.
Yeah.
By stepping outside your own perspective while still holding it, you make decisions that are demonstrably fair.
Which brings us to the ultimate stress test for this kind of operating system, the heated debate.
Oh boy.
Yeah. You are in an argument. Someone aggressively challenges your core political or personal beliefs. The natural evolutionary instinct is to put up the shield and grab the sword.
Fight or flight.
But instead of fighting, you engage in what's called cognitive distancing.
Right, and cognitive distancing is often misunderstood as just playing devil's advocate. But anyone can argue a point they don't believe just to be annoying.
Yeah, we all know that guy.
Exactly. True cognitive distancing means you are genuinely imagining the situation through your opponent's eyes, adopting their assumptions, their historical context, and their emotional state.
It's like playing a high-stakes game of chess. Most people just stare intensely at their own pieces, obsessing over their next move and how to protect their queen.
Right.
Cognitive distancing is the ability to mentally stand up, walk around the table, sit in your opponent's chair, and look at the exact same board from their vantage point.
And you process reality from both sides of the board simultaneously.
That sounds exhausting.
It is deeply unsettling because it makes you less certain of your own righteous anger.
Hmm.
When you understand exactly why the other person is moving their pieces the way they are, you can't demonize them as easily.
Yeah.
But the payoff is immense. It allows you to navigate intense conflict without impulsive, destructive reactions. You're not arguing to win dominance. You're processing information to reach an understanding.
And when you combine this bias catching with that kind of radical perspective shifting,
Yeah.
you unlock the pinnacle of the metacognitive system, which is the ability to update your thinking quickly. Imagine you are in that conversation, you are totally confident in your stance, and then someone presents a new, undeniable piece of evidence that proves you are mathematically or factually wrong.
Well, for a standard operating system, that moment is perceived as a physical threat.
Right.
The ego defenses fire up, the excuses come out, the goalposts get moved.
But for a highly metacognitive mind, there is a pause, the new data is processed, and the stance is updated immediately. Oh, I didn't know that. You're right. No ego death, no screaming match, just a software update.
Yeah, and in cognitive science, this framework is referred to as Bayesian updating.
Bayesian updating.
Yes, named after Thomas Bayes. It's essentially a mathematical theorem for updating probabilities based on new evidence. When applied to human psychology, it means treating mistakes and new evidence as valuable data rather than a threat to your identity.
Why is that so hard for us to do naturally? I mean, why do we fight it so much?
Because evolutionarily, being wrong often meant being cast out of the tribe, which literally meant death. The ego is a protective shell designed to keep you aligned with your group.
Wow.
Most minds resist being wrong because they conflate their opinions with their intrinsic worth. But if you view a mistake simply as a missing piece of the puzzle, you drop the shield. You learn exponentially faster.
Because you aren't tied down by the sunk cost fallacy of your old assumptions.
Exactly. You adapt dynamically to whatever the truth actually is.
Okay, so we have this picture of a mind that constantly monitors itself. You notice thoughts live, you intercept emotions with language, you simulate vast dialogue trees, you audit your own beliefs, you catch your shortcuts, you sit in the opponent's chair, and you update your software the second you get better data.
It's a lot.
It sounds like a superpower. It sounds like you are just floating above the rest of humanity in a zen state of perfect rationality. But there is a massive curveball here.
Yes, there is.
Running this advanced operating system exacts a heavy toll. We need to talk about the hidden tax of metacognitive IQ.
And the cost is significant. It plays out every single day. Because you are constantly monitoring your own mind, you never fully switch off.
You can't just relax.
No, there's an ever-present hum of overanalysis. You are hyper-aware of every minor shift in your mood, every logical fallacy in your fleeting thoughts, every potential butterfly effect outcome of your actions. It leads to profound mental fatigue.
It's exactly like having 20 demanding apps open in the background of your smartphone.
That's the perfect way to look at it.
Yes, you have incredible functionality. You're tracking your GPS location, downloading updates, rendering 3D graphics simultaneously. But the battery is perpetually at 12%, and the phone is physically hot to the touch. It's incredibly draining.
And that heat is literal metabolic demand. The brain consumes a massive amount of glucose when it's forced out of its automatic resting state
Yeah.
and into this high-alert executive functioning.
And beyond the sheer physical and mental fatigue, there is a profound social cost, right? It can feel incredibly isolating
Yes.
because you're seeing things other people are completely blind to.
Precisely. You are constantly observing the subtext of interactions. You notice the subtle impulses, the logical leaps, and the hidden assumptions before they calcify, not just in yourself, but in everyone around you.
That sounds overwhelming.
It really can be. It can feel like you are always a step ahead, or at least operating on a fundamentally different wavelength compared to people who just drift through life, reacting to whatever emotional weather hits them.
Right.
You see the machinery of the mind, the gears, the pulleys, the raw code, and it is very hard to unsee it and just enjoy the magic show like everyone else.
We've covered a lot of deep neurological ground today. To bring it all together, having a metacognitive IQ means you don't just have thoughts. You understand the entire architectural system behind them.
Absolutely.
You notice the spark of irritation before the forest fire starts. You see the underlying code of your own biases. It is a rare, expensive intelligence.
It is.
It comes with exhaustion, decision paralysis, and a distinct sense of isolation. But it also gives you an unparalleled level of agency over your own trajectory.
It is the difference between being a passive passenger in a vehicle and being the driver, the mechanic, and the navigator all at once.
That's a great way to put it.
It's exhausting to manage all those roles, but it is the only way to ensure you are actually choosing your destination rather than just ending up wherever the road happens to take you.
So I want to pose a question directly to you, the listener. As we trace the evolution of this kind of mind, from catching your anger live in the prefrontal cortex to running those immersive shower simulations, all the way to Bayesian updating when you're proven wrong, which piece of the puzzle felt the most familiar to you?
It's a great question.
Which one made you stop and realize, wait, I do that?
Because awareness really is the first necessary step toward mastering your own mind. And this raises an important final question for you to mull over.
What's that?
We discuss how your brain cannot fully distinguish between an imagined rehearsal and a real experience. If those neural pathways fire the exact same way, how might you intentionally use your own mental holodeck today? How could you actively rewrite your neurological reaction to an upcoming stressful situation before it even happens?
It all comes back to that glitch in the video game camera. Once you know how to zoom out and see yourself holding the controller, you realize you don't just have to play the game on its default settings, you can actually change the rules.